Hello, I would like to welcome everyone to the Northeastern Regional Advisory Council meeting for September 10th, 2020. I'm Brett Prevedel. I'm the chair of the RAC, and I'd like to take a moment to have the other RAC members that are present tonight introduce themselves. So you can just proceed. Why don't you go ahead and start, Dan?
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone. This is Dan Abeda, and I represent the Ashley National Forest.
Mike?
I'm Mike Smith. I represent the non-consumptive wildlife users.
Thank you. Dick?
Yeah, my name is Dick Bess. I represent the agricultural side.
Thank you. Natasha?
Natasha Haddon and represent the Bureau of Land Management.
Rebecca?
Rebecca Jones, and I represent the non-consumptive wildlife users also.
Thank you. Mike? Did you already introduce yourself, Mike?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Is Jeff joined us? Joe, can you hear us? Joe Arnold. Joe's having some audio difficulties, but he is present. Joe Arnold is a public at large RAC member. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize Randy Dirth from the Wildlife Board that is with us, and like to thank the DWR personnel for all they've done to prepare for the meeting and also being present. I need to read a statement before we start. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the ability of the virus to spread from person to person, the governor has implemented a number of executive orders directed at controlling spread of the virus by minimizing face-to-face interactions. Public gatherings are strongly discouraged by the CDC, state of Utah, and local health districts, since they facilitate face-to-face contact and pose an elevated risk for virus transmission. The Division of Wildlife Resources and the chair of this public body have determined that public gathering at Regional Advisory Council and Wildlife Board meetings presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who attend, and will conduct this meeting using a fully electronic format. This meeting format is authorized by a recent amendment to the Utah Code and executive order by Utah Governor Gary Herbert, and will be temporarily used in place of the in-person public meetings that usually occur around the state. Anyone wishing to comment on agenda topics in future meetings or to observe this meeting may do so by logging on to the division's webpage, where instructions and links are provided. I would now like to move to item 2 on the agenda, which is the approval of the agenda and the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes that Miles emailed out this week? And if so, I'd entertain any changes or any suggestions. Okay, hearing none, and I assume you all have the agenda for tonight. I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda and the minutes from our last meeting.
This is Natasha.
This is Dan.
Motion
Oh, go ahead, Natasha.
to accept the agenda and the meeting minutes from our last meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Dan Abeda, yeah, and I'll second that motion.
Thank you. I'll now call a roll call. Before I do that, I would like to recognize Jamie Reeve. Would you introduce yourself, Jamie?
Yeah, Jamie Reeve with the Ute Tribe Fish and Wildlife.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, we have a motion and a second, and I will do a roll call. Dan Abeda?
Yes.
Richie's not present. Joe? Jamie?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay. I believe I have everybody. It's unanimous. We'll proceed with the agenda. I will take the next item, which is a Wildlife Board meeting update. If you remember, the topics last time were bobcat and cougar seasons and regulations. So the bobcat recommendations were passed as recommended by the division unanimously by the Wildlife Board, as it was in our RAC. We had some discussion on the cougars. If you remember, as a RAC, we'd had some suggestions on maybe an motion that passed to change the way they did the new two tag option for the cougars. And the Wildlife Board did not agree with our motion, and they actually felt maybe they needed to go the other way and have as much opportunity to harvest cougars as possible. So they did not entertain that. So what it ultimately passed was they extended a couple of limited entry seasons by 30 days on the Oquirrh-Stansbury, the East and Wasatch Mountains, and the West Strawberry units. And that's the limited entry portion of the season that they extended. And then they did make a motion to clarify the definition of a kitten as came out of our RAC. So that was a good recommendation, and they agreed with that. And the rest of the proposal was passed as presented by the division. We didn't see it at the RAC, but the next item was an adjustment to the sensitive species list. And it was discussed at length at the Wildlife Board meeting, and a little bit contentious at times between the division and the Wildlife Board. And they decided they just didn't know enough about it to vote on it. So they've scheduled a work session on September 16th, which I believe is available on YouTube for RAC members to watch, to educate the Wildlife Board on the sensitive species list. And then they table that item until the next meeting, which is the 1st of October. And then there was some other items on their agenda that we also didn't see: the expo permit audit and the expo contract extension. And they were passed as presented. There was a motion made to ask the division to look into new hunting technology and update the board, and I assume the RACs will be updated on that, so we can kind of stay ahead of the curve on that. I believe that was it. Miles, if you would like to add anything, that you're welcome to, or you can roll right into the regional update.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything else to add to that, so I'll talk about a little bit about what's going on in the division here in the Northeast region lately. It's been a busy summer. It's been getting a lot of work done, so we're excited about that. Our aquatics section's been really busy all year long, but most recently they've been working on some rotenone treatments up in the Carter Creek drainage on the north slope of the Uintas. They've got some more work to do up there next week, but it's essentially removing non-native fish from that drainage in preparation for restoring Colorado River cutthroat trout, which is a sensitive species to its former range. So that's that project's going on, and hopefully this is the second year of that treatment to make sure that all those fish are removed in preparation for the stocking of the Colorado cutthroats. Our Flame Gorge personnel just finished electrofishing surveys on the Green River last week. The fish looked good and healthy as they normally do. There was one brown trout caught that was about 25.5 inches long and approaching 6 pounds. So fish are doing well in the Green River still, and it was a good, successful effort. Our aquatics biologists are working with Duchesne County and others on some restoration work in the Strawberry River drainage. That area was devastated by the Dollar Ridge fire and subsequent flooding events. So there's been some work to restore the road and some of the infrastructure up there. And so along with that is some fish improvement structures that are associated with some of the protection of the roadway. So hopefully with these improvements in place, we'll be able to get a fish population, a healthy fish population back in the Strawberry River in the future. Our wildlife section has been very busy with bears and bear issues this past couple of months. It's been a very dry summer and fall, and so a lot of bears are moving lower in elevation and along the river bottoms, where they're becoming in contact with people more and more. We've had a few cases of some dispersed camps that have left food and drinks and things outside and even in tents, and so that's caused some problems with bears this year as well. So we're hoping that bears hibernate soon, and next year they wake up to more plentiful food and we don't have quite so many issues. But along those lines, our folks are busy working on depredation issues from deer and elk. Because it has been a dry year, a lot of these animals are attracted to farmlands, and so we're busy trying to help alleviate some of those issues with some of our landowners. The BYU study is still ongoing this year in the Book Cliffs, where they're collaring baby fawns and calf elk. So far this year, there has been a higher percentage of twin fawns and calves born. There have been bigger fawns and calves born, and that's the result of better range conditions and better body conditions on the adult deer last year. However, the survival rate is still pretty low out in the Book Cliffs, but it is better than the previous year by a little bit, but it's certainly lower than something we want to see for fawns and calves survival rates at this point in the year. So there's still a lot of work to be done in the Book Cliffs to help our deer and elk populations turn the corner out there. So it's a priority we'll continue to work on. Our habitat section, they're busy building guzzlers out in the Book Cliffs. They're also cooperating with some of our federal agencies on coming up with restoration plans for some of the wildfires that are going on or have happened this year. We've had a couple, one up in the northeast corner of the state here in the Clay Basin area. And then of course, there's been a very large fire just recently burned over in the Rock Creek Range on Forest Service lands. So a lot of fire activity going on this year with the dry conditions. So their habitat folks are also busy contracting and preparing for restoration projects work that'll be taking place this fall. A lot of our seeding projects take place in the fall before the winter, and that'll help allow those projects to grow, the new seed to sprout in the spring and grow. So that they're really busy this time of year getting those projects underway. Our law enforcement folks, they've been really busy. They've been helping with security shifts on some of these wildfires that I mentioned. They've been busy helping some of the other sections with some of these nuisance bear issues. And then also it's a really busy time of year with hunts and patrolling our hunts as well. So they've had a full plate and they're doing a good job getting things done. So in our outreach section this year, we did cancel the kokanee viewing day at Sheep Creek. So we're not going to have a formal day, but we're encouraging people to go up and take a look at kokanee as they see fit. The kokanee, as of yesterday, there's only been a couple show up into the creek. So hopefully the next week or so, we'll see a bigger showing from kokanee, but they just haven't shown up a lot yet. It also snowed about 8 inches up there over the storm earlier this week. And so I think folks wait a few days, they'll find more favorable conditions and hopefully a lot more fish in the stream. We're planning on having a youth pheasant hunt. This will be held out at the Pleasant Valley Hunting Preserve. That's on September 26th. So any youth that are interested in signing up for that can go to our website. There's a link to there should be a link to the Eventbrite where they can register for that hunting opportunity. We're also going to be having a Sandhill Crane viewing day on October 3rd. It's kind of an auto tour type situation. In the morning, it'll be held in Jensen, and in the afternoon, it'll be in the Ouray Valley. So that's an opportunity to go out and view some Sandhill cranes. We'll continue to sell some of our major permit sales online. One of those coming up will be our Bobcat permit sales. That'll be online only, as we did with elk earlier this year. So people looking to buy one of those tags will be able to do so online. So with that, I think that's all I have to share for the summary this evening, unless there's any questions from the RAC. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor. We'll now move into item 5, which is fishing recommendations and fishing contest rule amendments. And before we go into that item, I've asked, is Trina on with us?
Yes, I'm here tonight.
Thank you. I've asked Trina to update the RAC and the public on the Pelican Lake and Red Fleet, because last we knew they were treating them and restocking them, and I thought it'd be good before we go into these regulations just to kind of have an update on where we're at right now biologically. Go
Sure.
ahead, Trina.
Okay, thanks. Do I need to introduce myself or no? Like if this were a real meeting?
Yes, please do for the public.
Okay, sure, thanks. So I am Trina Hedrick. I'm the Regional Aquatics Manager here in the Vernal office. And yes, so we treated Red Fleet Reservoir in 2015, October 2015. It's hard to believe it's been so long. We have done quite a lot of restocking since then. We actually started in the fall, immediately after it detoxed, with some wipers and some Colorado River cutthroat trout. And we have just, we've been restocking ever since. And we have, what we've seen in the reservoir is the wiper fishing is off the hook. It's been a great year this year. Walleye have struggled. We are working on trying to increase the size of our walleye stock. We were able to do that successfully this year for the first time, so it's very exciting. And we expect walleye survival to increase from that. Wipers are doing so well, though. We are decreasing the stocking of that particular species. We are seeing natural reproduction and recruitment for yellow perch and black crappie, with tiger trout and Colorado River cutthroat trout being an occasional catch. We did also, the management team recommended stocking largemouth bass in that water. And so we did do that, I believe. Let me see, the first time was 2018. We transferred some adults back when we were moving fish out of Steinecker, knowing that that reservoir was going to go down. And they are also naturally reproducing in there too. So we felt like Red Fleet is on its way. It's doing really well, but we do have some tweaking to do. That's what you'll see. You'll see that reflected in some of the regulation recommendations tonight. And I can explain some of those more if there are any questions. Pelican Lake was treated in 2018, and we did some restocking, mainly of transferred adults right away again after it detoxed. That was in December and January, immediately after. And then we've also transferred additional adults every year since then. And mostly bluegill. We're trying to get the bluegill going first before we worry as much about largemouth, but we do have largemouth fingerlings slated to go in. I think it's maybe 20,000 fingerlings for this fall. I don't know when those will come, but those are scheduled. And so, so yeah, Pelican's on its way. I've heard really good things about it. Of course, there's not going to be that many adults just yet of either species, but both are naturally reproducing and pulled off a spawn the very next year. I guess that was just last year after the treatment. So it's well on its way. We should see some good growth just because it's considered an untapped resource, you know, where you don't have as many fish filling that whole lake. So yeah, but I feel like both lakes are well on their way, but there will be some changes. And you'll see one of the regulation proposals for tonight is having to do with the Pelican Lake bluegill. We are very concerned that that first we won't have enough harvest on small fish, and that we'll have too much harvest on large fish. So that regulation recommendation is a reflection of that. And yeah, we're really excited to see how they go. We will keep an eye on them, continue to, every year we'll get out and sample, and we will probably continue to make minor changes every couple of years just based on what we see biologically. So.
Thank you. I've asked Randy to just kind of summarize, Randy Oplinger, the Sportfish coordinator for DWR in Salt Lake City, to summarize the Northeast change, the recommendations in this proposal. We all looked at the video and it was in detail, but I've asked him to just kind of go over the highlights of it before we go into discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Like you said, my name is Randy Oplinger, and I'm a Sportfish coordinator with the Division of Wildlife Resources, and I'm based out of our Salt Lake office. And I would like to thank all of you for your time tonight. I'd also like to thank you for looking over our presentation where we kind of outline our fishing regulation changes, not just in the Northeastern region, but what we're proposing on a statewide basis, and also our fishing contest rule change. I'd also like to thank you for your time watching some of our informational presentations. So the one by Craig Walker on our angler opportunity assessment, and our one by Jackie Watson on what's going on in the middle Provo River right now. But what I'm going to do is I'll quickly kind of run through the regulation changes that we're proposing for the Northeastern region. Trina and her crew have done really a good job of coming up with some good regulation changes, we feel like, for this particular regulation change cycle. We feel that these regulation changes both benefit species from a biological perspective, and also, and probably more importantly, they provide a lot of benefit for the angling public. So the first regulation change out of the Northeastern region that we're recommending is a change in our daily limit on bass at Flaming Gorge Reservoir. Currently the limit's 10 fish, and that's a combined total between largemouth and smallmouth. And we're recommending reducing that to a 3 fish limit. What that's going to do is that's going to simplify regulations. This actually dovetails some regulation changes that Wyoming is considering. Actually, both states are doing the same regulation change through their own processes. And the idea is, at the end of the day, that both Wyoming and Utah would have a consistent 3 fish, 3 bass regulation all across the entire reservoir. So this would create some consistency for the bass regulation in Flaming Gorge. Right now, the regulations differ on both sides of the lake. So we're kind of moving toward the direction of simplifying things and making just one consistent bass regulation across the entire lake. The second regulation change that we're proposing out of the Northeast region is also out of Flaming Gorge, and this one's for kokanee salmon. Currently, the limit for kokanee is a 4 trout limit, excluding lake trout, with up to 3 of those being kokanee. And what we basically are proposing is that we increase the number of kokanee that are allowed in that trout limit to 4 fish. And we would keep with that recommendation the current 12 fish limit for lake trout that exists at Flaming Gorge. And again, this is a regulation change we've done in concert with Wyoming, and Wyoming's proposing the same regulation change through their cycle. And what that'll do at the end of the day is, if approved by both states, it will create just one consistent kokanee regulation across the entire reservoir. The next regulation change that we have in the Northeast region was the Pelican Lake bluegill regulation change that Trina alluded to. Currently, the limit is 0 bluegill. And what we did is we basically were proposing a 15 fish with only 5 over 7 inch regulation at Pelican Lake. What this does is we feel like this benefits anglers because it provides anglers some opportunity to harvest bluegill, but also as we kind of look at the biology of bluegill and what we need to do to reestablish a trophy bluegill fishery at Pelican Lake, we feel that we need to protect some of those larger fish. So that's why we have that 5 over 7 inch restriction in this regulation they're proposing. The next regulation change we're proposing is one at Red Fleet Reservoir, and Trina kind of touched on Red Fleet and what's going on at Red Fleet right now, but this is a spearfishing regulation change. We're proposing a seasonal closure on spearfishing for bass at that reservoir. And what that's intended to do is really protect our bass populations. We know spearfishers are very effective at harvesting fish, and what this does is it helps protect fish during the spawn and helps bass populations rebound a little bit after the rodone treatment at Red Fleet. The next one is a Red Fleet, another Red Fleet one. This one's related to panfish. So the current panfish regulation at Red Fleet is 50 fish per species. And what we're recommending is we change that to a daily limit of 50 panfish, and that's a combined total, with no more than 20 of those being black crappie. And what we're trying to do on this one is we're trying to limit the harvest of panfish at Red Fleet to help that panfish population recover, which will benefit our panfish anglers, and also panfish are an important sport or forage species. So that's going to benefit some of the predators like wiper and walleye at Red Fleet. The next regulation change we're proposing out of the Northeast region is one at Starvation Reservoir. This is another panfish related one. The current limit is 50 fish per panfish species. And we surveyed support for a limit of 20 panfish. So that's a combined total. And once again, this is intended to protect panfish populations, and that's going to benefit anglers by helping to restore those populations in the lake. And also it's going to provide a better forage base for our predators at starvation. And then the last two we have in the Northeastern region are really the same regulation change, but they're on two different waters. So one's on the West Fork of the Cheyenne River and the other one's on Wolf Creek. And these are changes in the seasonal closure dates on that those two rivers. We're proposing that we adjust them to May 15th through 6 a.m. on the second Saturday of July. And what this does is this opens up these two waters for about 4.5 or 5 more months of the year for angler access. So this provides anglers some opportunity to fish these two waters. We're proposing that we retain the seasonal closures, however, to protect cutthroat in those two waters during the spawning season. So that's really kind of a quick overview of the regulation changes just out of the Northeastern region they're proposing. And like I said, as I kind of covered in my presentation, there's additional regulation changes that we have in other regions, and also some statewide regulation changes and a change in our fishing contest rule that we're also proposing.
Thanks, Randy. Are there any questions for Randy while we've got him on the spot from the RAC?
Yeah, Randy. Hey, this is Dan Abeda. I just got a quick question on the change on bass, the bass limit up at Flaming Gorge Reservoir. Could you give some biological rationale for that reduction from 10 bass down to 3? I assume there is some biological rationale, right?
Well, there is some biological rationales. We alluded to one of the big reasons for this is to create one consistent regulation across the entire lake. But really from a biological perspective on the Utah side of the lake, we feel that we have bass populations that are pretty strong right now. And honestly, as we kind of look at angler harvest of bass at Flaming Gorge, we see that it's really almost nothing right now. So we're proposing that we reduce the bass limit at Flaming Gorge, but it's really not going to have much of an impact on the populations in general at Flaming Gorge, or really the angler experience at Flaming Gorge, just because right now very few fish are harvested.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the RAC for Trina or Randy?
Hi, this is Jamie Reeve. I do have a question for Randy. You're alluding to 3 fish per angler. What if Wyoming doesn't pass that, or is it a pretty good bet that they will pass that?
Wyoming is currently going through their regulation change cycle to make that change. Obviously, there's some chance that that's not going to happen, but where that would leave us if it's not passed and passed in Utah, it would give us a 3 fish limit on the Utah side of things, and it would still require catch and release angling on the Wyoming side of things. But really through conversations with Wyoming, we're feeling pretty optimistic that they're going to move forward with their regulation change, and that we are heading in the direction of having consistent bass regulations across all of Flaming Gorge. And that's really in mutual interest of both states. Both states have been working together collaboratively for a number of years, and we know this is something that anglers are really interested in, and both states are pretty committed to moving forward to that consistent bass regulation across all of Flaming Gorge.
Thank you.
Yeah, hey, Randy, there was one other part of my question I failed to ask you. Is there any biological rationale for the reduction in bass up on the gorge tied to burbot?
There could be some biological rationale. We're seeing burbot populations start to expand more southward in the lake. So primarily they're more on the Wyoming side of the lake, but they are heading south. So we are a little bit concerned down the road of potentially what impacts burbot could have on smallmouth populations. So reducing harvest, yeah, that might protect burbot, or not burbot, but smallmouth populations somewhat, and help them, maintain strong as we watch burbot expand in the reservoir.
Okay. Hey, thanks again.
Miles, would you like to summarize the comments that we received?
Sure. So there were only 5 members of the public that commented on the Northeast region. And so for these fishing recommendations, 40% opposed, 40% supported, and then there were 20% with people in neutral. One person was concerned about the bluegill limit at Pelican. Another person was concerned that maybe we weren't stocking enough forage species for walleye and other species. It didn't necessarily relate to one of our specific recommendations. And then a couple of people did support wanting to have some consistency with kokanee and bass at Flaming Gorge. So yeah, pretty small return on public comments, but it was kind of evenly distributed with this group.
Thank you. And then statewide, really almost all of the negative comments were because of the extra restrictions on spearfishing. We just had the one season change on that here on Red Fleet, but there was some statewide, some other changes. And so I think most of the comments were positive throughout, with the exception of several people that were active spear fishermen that opposed it. Is that safe to say, Randy?
We've had some questions about the spearfishing regulation changes come up in the other RAC board meetings, but in terms of the comments we received on a statewide basis, we've actually received very few comments, and I don't think we've received any spearfishing related comments, at least yet, on them.
Okay, with that, is there any other discussion from the RAC before we move forward? This item also contains the fishing contest rule amendments on the, so we'd actually be dealing with, we could split them if anyone wished to separate out the fishing contest amendments. But I think everybody saw them. It was basically simplifying the rules and making it a little more understandable, and when you did and when you didn't need a permit. So with that, is there discussion about either the fishing regulations or the fishing contest rule amendments by the RAC?
Hi, this is Joe Arnold, if you can hear me. Tell me about the West Fork of the Duchesne change from May 15th to the second Saturday. Can you just kind of elaborate on that? I know it's usually been closed all year until July 15th or the second weekend. So could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so traditionally, when it's the current regulation is it's closed from January 1st up to, I believe, the second Saturday of July. What we're proposing is we change those dates to May 15th through the second Saturday of July. So we're proposing we basically hack off the first 4 months or so of that seasonal closure. The reason we're making that recommendation is honestly that seasonal closure is in place to help protect spawning cutthroat populations, but that first part of the year between January 1st and May 15th is well before the cutthroat spawn actually would happen. So what that means is we're basically preventing anglers from accessing the West Fork or Duchesne for several months of the year where they could have access, where really they're not going to have any impact on spawning cutthroat populations. So this regulation change is really intended to open up some months of the year for angler access, and it's going to be months that, you know, it's before the cutthroat spawn, so anglers aren't going to have any impact on the cutthroat.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was curious, if it was open up until May 15th. So it would be open all year until May 15th, closed for those, whatever that is, roughly 2 months, and then open back up.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So it'd be closed from May 15th through the second Saturday of July, but the remaining 10 months or so of the year it would be open for anglers.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the RAC?
Yeah, Brett, this is Dan Beta again. Hey, I was just kind of reviewing an email that Ken Strong with SFW had put out about, I know this isn't related at all to the proposal right now, but this concern about the cost to fish the gorge. So I guess what I'm reading here are Wyoming residents that don't pay anything to come and fish the Utah side, but the Utah residents pay, $30 or $40 or something like that to go fish the Wyoming side. Randy, has that been discussed in any of the other regions this week or last week? Where's that going? Where's that? You saw the comment, right?
Dan, I'll grab this. Yeah, this is Craig Walker, Assistant Chief for the Division of Wildlife Resources Aquatic Section. The regulation currently stands for a reciprocal stamp to be purchased by Utah residents to fish the Wyoming side of the reservoir. It's going to cost them an additional $30. And for Wyoming residents to fish the Utah portion of the reservoir, it will cost them an additional $10 for a reciprocal stamp. What SFW has suggested is that there be a true reciprocal agreement between the two states that is more similar to Lake Powell and Bear Lake, where one state's license allows you to fish the reservoir in its entirety. We have been working with Wyoming to push for that over the past 6 years. Wyoming has been attempting to get that passed through their commission. However, their commission is reluctant to do that. And in actuality, after Wyoming Game and Fish began to look at it, they're a little bit reluctant to do it as well. The revenue that they accrue every year from their reciprocal stamp sales at the gorge equates to about $150,000. And they are, as you would expect, reluctant to give that up. So just to inform folks that between the cost of an actual license and the cost of a reciprocal stamp, we're plus or minus $5, regardless of whether you're a Utah angler fishing Flaming Gorge or Wyoming angler fishing Flaming Gorge. So I think that right now it's fairly equitable, but we do see SFW's point, and they are requesting that the RACs, I believe, bring something forward in the way of a recommendation to the Wildlife Board for the Wildlife Board to then submit a letter to both Wyoming Game and Fish and the Wyoming Commission requesting that reciprocity that I mentioned earlier, true reciprocity, be pursued and be supported.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Craig.
Yep.
So thanks for bringing that up, Dan. And if we want to make that recommendation, let's do it separate from the fishing regulations, because that'd just be a recommendation to the Wildlife Board. We're not able to write a letter at this level at the RAC. We're just advisory. So if the RAC wanted to recommend to the Wildlife Board that they approach Wyoming, we can handle that however you wish. So if there are no other questions on the fishing recommendations and the fishing contest rule amendments, let's deal with that one first. Let me give you the opportunity for one more time. Is there any other questions? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion on item 5 on the agenda, fishing recommendations and fishing contest rule amendments.
Yeah, this is Dan. I'll go ahead and make a motion that we accept the division's proposal for the fishing recommendations and the fishing contest as it's been presented here.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, this is Joe Arnold. I will second that.
Thank you. I'll do a roll call. Dan Abeda,
Yes.
Joe Arnold,
Yes.
Jamie Reed,
Yes.
Dick Betts,
Yes.
Natasha,
Yes.
Rebecca,
Yes.
and Mike.
Yes.
Was that a yes, Mike?
Yes. Yes, it was a
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Now, Dan, if you wanted to make that motion regarding the reciprocal agreement with Wyoming, you're free to do so. And this would be a recommendation that we would make to the Wildlife Board.
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and make that motion that we, as recommended, write a letter of support to make that like Craig mentioned, a true reciprocity, and try to move in that direction. I think that would be good for both states.
Okay, does everyone understand? I think, Dan, just my take on it is, if they're not going to reduce their fees, what we're probably suggesting is we increase our fees, right? Is that safe to say?
You're talking increasing for non-residents, correct, Brett?
Yes, we're talking Wyoming license holders that fish in Utah. They're currently paying $10. I believe, Craig, you said with the license and the reciprocal stamp, the cost is almost the same, right? Did you say that?
Yeah, I think it's within $5 of one another at this point.
So there's a difference in the license cost, and there's also a difference in the reciprocal stamp that's needed across the state line. So when you combine the two, there's not a big disparity, but there is a big
Correct.
disparity on the stamp itself.
Yes, sir.
Craig, this is Dick Best. I've got a question. Of that $10 that they pay, how much does Utah receive? Do they receive all $10? And does Wyoming receive the full 30 from Utah residents?
As I understand it through our licensing folks, yes. And Lindy could probably weigh in on that more so than me, but as I understand it, yes.
Sorry, Mike. Lindy, Varney, licensing coordinator. That is correct. We obtain that $10 for the reciprocal licenses for the state of Utah.
And that's
Wyoming
recently,
the 30.
sorry, this is Joe Arnold. That used to be $10. So is it just increasing, proposed to increase next year? Because the Utah to fish on Wyoming has always been $10 in the past. Are they moving that price up?
We, Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, are not suggesting that that price point be changed at this point.
Yeah, and to tag your question, Joe, I think Wyoming changed their price. They up to $30 maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. So it was $10 for both states until recently, but in the last 2 years or so, it's been increased on the Wyoming side to 30.
And I guess this is Dan again. I guess where I'm going with this is, until there's an agreement where there's a true reciprocity, then, who's to say when Wyoming's going to raise it again another, $20 or, I mean, I know it's probably $10 for many, many years, and it jumped up from $10 to $30 a couple of years ago. But I just think it would be wise if Utah pursued trying to make that, kind of a more of a true reciprocity, like Craig had mentioned. So a letter from this RAC, and I'm assuming that the other RACs are doing this as well. I don't know that. I mean, Craig or Randy, you could chime in there, but I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from.
So for one of the four RAC has actually submitted a full-blown motion on this issue and recommended that the Wildlife Board put forward a letter to Wyoming Game and Fish and their Fish Commission recommending that they pursue reciprocity with Utah that is similar to what we have at Lake Powell and Bear Lake, where a state's license gets you full access to the reservoir regardless of which state your license is purchased from. The other 3 RACs did not officially make a motion on this, but will be recommending that the Wildlife Board move forward with a letter at the Wildlife Board meeting coming up on October 1. So from what I have seen thus far, and for those of you who haven't been watching the other meetings, you could go either way on this. Right now, the Division of Wildlife Resources understands SFW's recommendation is not for us to get into a price war, but actually get into a mindset of reciprocity in the truest sense.
So I didn't mean to interrupt your motion, Dan, but we have a motion. Would you just restate it, Dan, that you would like the Wildlife Board to?
You bet. Yeah, I would like the RAC, this RAC to support a letter that goes to the Wildlife Board that supports true reciprocity in the future, to have both states come into agreement, like has already been proposed by another RAC here in the state. So that's just what I'm saying. I just agree. I mean, that's Fleming Gorge Reservoir. That's our region. I mean, so to me, I think that's important that, we try to work, with the state of Wyoming and reach that true reciprocity in its truest sense, like Craig was talking about. So
Okay,
I'm just in support of that.
Thank you. So we have a motion to make a recommendation from our Northeast RAC to the Wildlife Board to work with Wyoming and pursue that. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. Joe Arnold.
Thank you. Roll call. Dan?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimous. Which brings us to the next 2 items. We'll go with item number 6, the Angler Opportunity Assessment Update. Craig Walker is on with us. I think everyone saw the presentation. Are there any questions for Craig? Or Craig, feel free to speak if you wish on that item. It's informational. We will not be taking a vote, but this is your opportunity to get any clarification. Okay. Craig, that was very, very good presentation, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, and if offline or at any time during this meeting, if you can think of any questions that you'd like to ask in relation to that presentation, please feel free to get with me. More than willing to field those.
Okay. Thank you. If there are no questions on that topic from the RAC, we'll move on. The same is an informational item also for the Middle Provo River update. And there was also a presentation that I think everyone saw on that. Craig, who's on to represent that?
Chris Crockett was on, I believe.
Yeah, good evening, Craig. I'm still on and available for any questions or comments.
Thanks, Chris.
Chris Crockett is our regional manager down there in the central region.
Okay. Were there any questions regarding the Provo River presentation? Okay, if not, thank you, Chris, for being available. And if there are any questions He can be reached, I guess, after the meeting. That'll move us to the last item on the agenda, which is the deployed military amendments, and Lindy's present. I'll just give a quick summary. It's kind of a quick item anyway, Lindy. So just go ahead and give us your brief summary of it.
Lindy Varney, I'm the licensing coordinator, work in the Salt Lake office. So a quick summary of this is we wanted to offer some benefit for our deployed military. So if you get deployed more than 90 consecutive days during the year, we would waive the hunting or combination license fee requirement for you to be able to obtain a bonus or preference point. Also, the second part of it is we would allow these deployed military members to buy a bonus or preference point anytime during that year if they've been deployed overseas for 90 consecutive days. So we just wanted to kind of, give them show our appreciation for their service to our country and offer this opportunity to them.
Thank you. And they would you'd waive the requirement of a combination license just for the application, right? You wouldn't waive one. If they come back and they go hunting, do they still need to get a license?
Yes, they would. It's just the requirement. If they had to buy a preference or bonus point, you have to have a hunting or combination license to be eligible, and we will waive that. But if they come back after they're deployed, they still need a hunting or combination license if they want to participate in any hunting activity.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from the RAC for Lindy?
This is Dan. I don't have a question, Brett, but I just want to say I think this is a really good step in the right direction, Lindy. So I appreciate your efforts, your staff's efforts, and everybody in the division that has kind of tried to make this, bring this to pass. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Miles, I don't believe we had any.
So the public, it was 100% support. I don't think anybody made any specific comment on this, though.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions or discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion on item number 8, the rule amendments for deployed military.
This is Natasha. I'll make a motion to accept the proposal as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Dick. I second that motion.
Thank you. Roll call. Dan?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was unanimous. My yeses and nos look a little different than last month on the lion discussion. That's the last item on our agenda. Miles, did you have anything else, or anyone from the division?
No, I don't. Thanks for everybody for participating tonight, and we'll look forward to next time.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
This is Dick. Make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Any seconds on that?
Joe Arnold, I will second that.
Thank you. Roll call. Dan?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
And Mike?
Yes.
Thank you for your participation, and thank you, public, for those of you that attended our meeting, and this meeting is now adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.